working for CI. And today I'm going to cover the topic build radiators on Raspberry Pi. So at ThoughtWorks, build radiators are quite common on all of our projects. We have some sort of build radiators, and many of us are using Raspberry Pi for it. And I'm here to just show you how you can go about creating a build radiator for yourself on your team. So starting with the basics, what is a build radiator? So usually a build radiator will be a huge build monitor sitting somewhere in the corner on the wall, mounted somewhere on the wall, where your team can see the status of all your builds. And it will have huge tabs like these, which will show the status of the build, and it will also give some extra information like the time it took for the tests or the deployments, and maybe even the name of the committer or the materials that went into the build. Next, coming to a Raspberry Pi. What is a Raspberry Pi? So Raspberry Pi is a small computer, as you can see there. It's basically an ARM-based computer, and it's as small as this. So it costs around 2,000 to 3,000 bucks. And so it's much cheaper than purchasing a full-fledged laptop or a Mac Mini. And so the advantage that you get is that you can play around with it. You can do much more than just building a build radiator. So you have much more, endless possibilities with a Pi. So what I'm doing is that I'm going to create, before creating a build radiator, you first have to set up the Raspberry Pi. So what you can do is that on a Pi, you can install various Linux distributions. And there are about 3 Linux distributions out there right now, Raspbian, Fedora, and Arch Linux. And what I'm doing is that I'm gonna basically download Fedora, which is a Fedora flavored, Fedora ported to the Raspberry Pi. And what you can do is you can go to the Raspberry Pi website, download the Fedora image, and you have to burn that image onto the memory card that you get with the Pi. So you can do that using the dd command. So what you do is that you dd the Fedora image onto that memory card. So it takes around 15-20 minutes to actually the burn to complete. So while you're burning the Fedora image onto the Pi, what you can do is you can start working on the build radiator. Now for any basic build radiator, the main input will be the list of CI servers that you have. So what I'm doing is that I'm going to create a build radiator that supports the CC tray XML. And so what you do is that you will start, so what I'm doing is that I'm going to create a basic Sinatra application that takes in a list of CI servers, the URL of the CC tray XML. And maybe, so if you're using a basic CI server like Snap, so it does not require any authentication, it just has a CC tray URL that you can use. And if you're using something complicated that requires authentication, you can even supply a username and password in your server's YAML file. Now the next step is the logic. So what we can do is that in the controller, in the Sinatra controller, what we are doing is that I'm loading up the YAML file that I just created, which has the list of projects, list of servers. And there is a nice gem called as CI status. So what that CI status does is that it will take in the CC tray URL, the username and password if any, and it will basically fetch the CC tray from the CI server, and it will also parse the XML, and it will give you a nice list of builds. So these builds, they have various information about what was the status of the build, the time it took, and when did it run. So what I'm doing over here is that I'm partitioning these builds into 2 parts, failed builds and passed builds. And I'm passing it to the view. Now, so in the view, what I'm doing is that I'm first displaying the failed builds followed by the passed builds. So why the failed builds first? Because whenever you are building a build radiator, you'll be more worried whenever a build breaks. So you want it highlighted on the top. So that's why I'm displaying the failed builds first. And the second thing that you will be doing in a view is that you need to update the status every time. So there is some sort of polling that is, it's a basic JavaScript that is refreshing the page every 10 seconds. Now, this is the basic HTML. You can also add some CSS And the build radiator is basically complete. So now to deploy it on the Raspberry Pi. So now you have Linux, you have Pydora running on your Raspberry Pi. So how will you deploy it?
Last 30 seconds.
So what you basically do is that you'll just, maybe you have set up a Git repo for your build radiator. You can just clone it on the Raspberry Pi. You do a bundle install, and then you just start up the Sinatra server. And once the server is running, you can just open the browser on the Pi and navigate to localhost 9292. 9292 is the default port for Sinatra. And voila, this is the build radiator that you get in like 15-20 minutes. So coming to the advantages of a build, why would you do this? The basic reason is that you'll get quick status, you'll be getting quick feedback for your builds. The entire team can view this, and it is going to save money and electricity since you're using a Pi. Thank you. So if you just want to view the source code, it's there on GitHub. Thank you.